Dear friends, welcome back to watch my video on the journal of the first voyage of Vasco da Gama, 1497 to 1499, edited by E.G. Revenstein in 1898 about the King of Calicut and its people in 15th century. This book gives the day-to-day activities of the explorer. I present the journal of the day which explains Vasco da Gama's audience with the King of Calicut. May 28. In conducting the captain, they showed us much respect, more than is shown in Spain to a king. The number of people was countless, for in addition to those who surrounded us, and among whom there were 2,000 armed men, they crowded the roofs and houses. The king's palace. The farther we advanced in the direction of the king's palace, the more did they increase in number. And when we arrived there, men of much distinction and great lords came out to meet the captain and join those who were already in audience upon him. It was then an hour before sunset. When we reached the palace, we passed through a gate into a courtyard of great size, and before we arrived at where the king was, we passed 4 doors through which we had to force our way, giving many blows to the people. When at last we reached the door where the king was, there came forth from it a little old man who holds a position resembling that of a bishop, and whose advice the king acts upon in all affairs of the temple. This man embraced the captain when he entered the door. Several men were wounded at this door, and we only got it by the use of much force. A royal audience. The king was in a small court, reclining upon a couch covered with a cloth of green velvet, above which was a good mattress, and upon this again a sheet of cotton stuff, very white and fine, more so than any linen. The cushions were after the same fashion. In the left hand the king held a very large golden cup, sputun, having a capacity of half an almud, 8 pins, and its mouth. This cup was 2 palms, 16 inches wide, and apparently it was massive. Into this cup the king threw the husks of a certain herb which is chewed by the people of this country because of its smoothing effects, and which they call atambor, tambulam. On the right side of the king stood a basin of gold, so large that a man might just encircle it with his arms. This contains the herbs. There were likewise many silver jugs. The canopy above the couch was all gilt. The captain, on entering, saluted in the manner of the country by putting the hands together, then raising them towards heaven, as is done by Tamils when addressing God, and immediately afterwards opening them and shutting the fists quickly. The king beckoned to the captain with his right hand to come nearer, but the captain did not approach him, for it is the custom of the country for no man to approach the king except only the servant who hands him the herbs, and when anyone addresses the king, he holds his hand before the mouth and remains at a distance. When the king beckoned to the captain, he looked at us, others, and ordered us to be seated on the stone bench near him, where he could see us. He ordered the water for our hands should be given us, as also some fruit, one kind of which resembled a melon, except that its outside was rough and the inside sweet, whilst another kind of fruit resembled a fig and tasted very nice. There were men who prepared these fruits for us, and the king looked at us eating and smiled, and talked to the servant who stood near him, supply him with the herbs referred to. Then throwing his eyes on the captain, who sat facing him, he invited him to address himself to the courtiers present, saying there were men of such distinction that he could tell whatever he desired to say, and they would repeat it to him, the king. The captain major replied that he was the ambassador of the king of Portugal and the bearer of a message which he could only deliver to him personally. The king said this was good, and immediately asked him to be conducted to a chamber. When the captain major had entered, the king too rose and joined him, whilst we remained where we were. All this happened about sunset. An old man who was in the court took away the couch as soon as the king rose, but allowed the plate to remain. The king, when he joined the captain, threw himself upon another couch, covered with various stuffs embroidered in gold, and asked the captain what he wanted. And the captain told him he was the ambassador of a king of Portugal, lord of many countries, and the possessor of great wealth of every description, exceeding that of any king of these parts. That for a period of 60 years, his ancestors had annually sent out vessels to make discoveries in the direction of India, as they knew that there were Christian kings there like themselves. This, he said, was the reason which induced him to order this country to be discovered, not because they sought for gold or silver. For this they had such abundance that they need not what was to be found in this country. He further stated that the captain sent out travel for a year or two until their provisions were exhausted, and then returned to Portugal without having succeeded in making the desired discovery. There reigned a king now whose name was Dom Manuel, who had ordered him to build 3 vessels, of which had been appointed Captain Major, and who had ordered him not to return to Portugal until he should have discovered this king of the Tamils, in pain of having his head cut off. That 2 letters had been entrusted to him to be presented in case he succeeded in discovering him, and that he would do so on the ensuing day. And finally, he had been instructed to say by word of mouth that he, the King of Portugal, desired to be his friend and brother. In reply to this, the king said that he was welcome, that on his part he held him as a friend and brother, and would send ambassadors with him to Portugal. This latter had been asked as a favor, the captain pretending that he would not dare to present himself before his king and master unless he was able to present at the same time some men of this country. These or many other things passed between the two in this chamber, and as it was already late in the night, the king asked the captain with whom he desired to lodge, with Tamils or with Moors. The captain replied, neither with Tamils nor with Moors, and begged as a favor that he be given lodging by himself. The king said he would order it thus, upon which the captain took leave of the king and came to where we were, that is, to a veranda lit up by a huge candlestick. By the time 4 hours of the night had already gone. There are more details about Calicut mentioned in the journal of Portuguese traveler Vasco da Gama. We'll meet you soon with another video telling about the trade of Calicut during 15th century. Until then, thank you with wishes.